So before I get to the review itself, I should probably tell you guys that I'm sick, which you'll probably notice by my occasional sniffing, coughing, and the fact that my voice is probably fucked. So expect some technical difficulties as I try to cut around the coughing and wheezing and all that other crap to make this less of an annoying listening experience for you guys. But anyway, let's get to the review. And this time we're going to be doing the War of Jokes and Riddles, the latest of Tom King's Batman arcs that recently completed with issue 32 in a run that he purportedly wants to last over 100 issues, which would be a horrifying thing indeed. Just the fact that this guy is already closing out Snyder's issue count alone is probably one of the more depressing things to come out of DC these days, and the possibility of him writing Batman for twice as long as Snyder did, at least in numbers of issues, would be most saddening indeed. So, the War of Jokes and Riddles, to put it bluntly right off the bat, because this is an arc that I cannot really analyze without spoiling it, because there's a big reveal in the final issue that's kind of supposed to be the reason Batman even explains anything about this big event in Gotham's past, and it's really hard to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of where the arc majoritarily doesn't work and where it kind of does work without really talking about spoilers. So, in this short little spoiler-free review, I'm just going to say that War of Jokes and Riddles is not as overtly terrible as all the other Tom King Batman stories. In fact, I think it's perfectly readable, and if you're someone who's only ever read Tom King's run, or you just read this storyline in a sort of vacuum, you don't really know Batman's comic book history and all that crap, I think you can safely read this. You'll probably like it, and you'll definitely like it a lot more than I do. But as someone who has much more experience with reading Batman, where Batman's character has been previous to this arc, it really doesn't work in a lot of respects. It's not as teeth-grindingly shitty as it was as the issues were coming out, because every issue was just assaultingly either flat or boring or trying way too hard to be deep and falling completely flat. And the dialogue was just completely atrocious. And rereading this whole thing in bulk definitely solves a lot of the issues. The stilted dialogue isn't quite as stilted because you can just kind of read the whole thing through to completion. Some of these issues with events really falling flat are kind of elevated when you read it collected, but overall, I cannot in good conscience call this good. I can call it, like, decent, maybe, but I'd sort of say mediocre is the right word. It's mediocre, it does some things kind of well, but the art really fails it, and a lot of the narrative decisions really fail it, and overall it feels like a big missed opportunity. And it's not going to piss you overtly off like I Am Suicide or I Am Gotham, both of which just suck enormous amount of balls, but it's still not what I would consider particularly great stuff. So that's this non-spoiler review, but here's the spoiler one. So the War of Jokes and Riddles is basically told kind of in medias res through Batman's perspective. Batman recently reconnected with Catwoman and he asked her to marry him, but before the marriage, or at least I should say engagement, can be completely finalized, Batman tells Selina that he has a secret from the War of Jokes and Riddles, a particular battle between the Joker and the Riddler, who both divided up Batman's rogues gallery in the criminal underworld, and they basically try to kill each other for a few months, with Batman perpetually trying and failing to stop them until a certain paradigm shift happened. And it was at that final day of the war, when things finally resolved themselves, that Batman did something that is so dark and terrible that he's never told anyone about it. He hasn't spoken to Alfred about it. He hasn't spoken to Dick about it, to Barbara. Nobody knows about this, but he's going to share it with Selina. And it's such a big deal that Batman has not only kept it a secret, but he's also choosing to tell this to Selina as the only other person to be aware of this besides, the other parties involved, because he thinks it's going to make or break their relationship moving forward. He basically thinks it's such a big defining moment for him that moment will show Selina who he really is, and he wants her to know that before they decide to get married, so it doesn't inevitably end in disaster, which it will, because this is shit superhero fiction. So that's kind of the whole reason Batman is going back to this big event in Gotham's past. And the thing about this is that there are a bunch of narrative decisions here that just flat out absolutely don't work for me. The first one is the fact that this is supposed to be kind of a sequel to Zero Year. But the characterization of Batman and the way certain events are treated, you would think that this is actually trying to retcon out Zero Year and Scott Snyder's interpretation of young Batman and try to reinsert the Batman Year One person. Because the way Snyder wrote Batman in Zero Year and War of Jokes and Riddles takes place like a few months afterwards. So there really is no reason Batman should be just a completely different person in just the span of a few months from the guy he was beforehand. In Zero Year, Batman is a young man bursting with energy, not anger necessarily. He's just really energetic. He's showing up at Gotham. He's young. He's full of energy. He's like, yeah, I'm going to kick ass. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. He's fairly optimistic. He's very much punk rock Batman. He's just a young dude who's ready to, try and grab life by the balls and beat the shit out of it because that's what Batman does best. And it's a really refreshing take on not just the Batman character in general, but also the origin story Batman. And it's a vastly different interpretation than when Frank Miller did in Batman Year One. And in the Zero Year, Riddler establishes himself as Batman's first true greatest nemesis because he takes over Gotham City. He creates it into this big apocalyptic wasteland. He's got robots here. It's a really big, sprawling kind of origin story that some people can obviously dislike because it is so big and bombastic, but personally, I find it a really big, refreshing change of pace when it comes to Batman origin stories, which are usually very, very low-key. And Zero Year does very much a lot of that kind of stuff, where you expect it to be like this, and you're kind of even programmed to think that this is how the origin thing is supposed to happen, but Zero Year very much just gives that the big middle finger and does its own thing. And this is supposed to be kind of a sequel to that, and the characterization of Batman has fuck all with the side of jack shit to do with the Zero Year version. Like I said, Zero Year Batman is punk rock Batman. He's there to kick ass, take names. He knows he's kind of cool, and he kind of enjoys the job, and there is like that young man energy to him. And here, in the span of a few months, apparently Batman becomes this really stoic, super brooding, jaded, tired prick at the ripe old age of 26. And this makes absolutely no sense. Like, this is not the Batman of Zero Year. This is Year One Batman, who was already characterized as being like this more machine than man type person, a really boring interpretation of Batman, might I admit, that I don't really care for and never will. And this is supposed to be kind of a continuation of that. But like I said, King and DC keep acting like this is a kind of a continuation of the guy we saw in Zero Year, and the characterization makes absolutely fuck all sense with that. These are two completely different people that have absolutely nothing to do with one another, and this is an issue that permeates the rest of the story because there's a moment where Deadshot and Deathstroke fight one another, and Batman has this big kind of speech about it where he's like, Deathstroke's the greatest assassin ever, Deadshot's the greatest marksman ever, and like these guys have been at it for years and years and years, and I'm just a few months away from kicking a tree. And that makes absolutely no sense because, like I said, Zero Year was a really big deal. Like in Zero Year, Batman fights the Red Hood gang, which was terrorizing Gotham. He, fights the Flood. He fights a fucking post-apocalyptic, robot-infested Gotham, and he saves the entire city from being blown off the face of the planet. Batman, in this continuity, is not just a dude whose most impressive achievement is catching a baby off a bridge and kicking a fucking tree down. It's much, much bigger than that, and that line of dialogue makes absolutely no sense. It's another instance where King, in promotional material, will say, oh yeah, I'm respecting the new origin, but he's clearly not because he keeps trying to insert Year One stuff into it. And this gets really awkward with the Riddler because the Riddler is supposed to be pre-established as one of Batman's greatest nemeses, but then throughout the storyline you have stuff like Joker saying, oh, well, who cares about the Riddler sucks. And that's a really funny line and really true before Zero Year. But Zero Year is still supposed to count. And by this point, the Riddler is easily the most impressive villain Batman has had. He's his first big villain and the biggest one so far, chronologically speaking. So this is really awkward kind of plotting and character thing that just irks the shit out of me. Not just because I really like Zero Year, but also because if you're just gonna ignore 0 year, just fucking say 0 year doesn't count anymore. Just remove it. Insert your boring ass Batman Year One back into continuity and make a sequel to that, because it's really obnoxious when you're gonna tell me you're gonna do a sequel to something I like and then just kind of fuck with it over and over and over again to various different ways. And could go back to Batman's characterization. This creates a really big problem with the ending. And the ending is a big load of nonsense. The ending is basically that Riddler started this whole war because Joker can't laugh. Batman has made everything so boring for the Joker that he can't laugh, and he goes on doing random crimes to try and make himself laugh. And so Joker creates this entire convoluted scheme where the criminal underworld will fight, and then Kite Man is going to team up with Batman, and they're going to destroy the Riddler's entire plan, and the Joker's going to find everything so hilariously absurd that Kite Man is the deciding factor in this conflict that the Joker will laugh. And Joker doesn't laugh because, of course, Riddler explains everything to him, and so the joke isn't funny. But when Batman gets so pissed off at this whole turn of events, at such a stupid, petty reason was the reason for this whole war for all these dead people, Batman tries to kill the Joker, try to kill Riddler. Joker stops him. Riddler did not anticipate this, and so the Joker laughs. And the whole point of the whole speech is that Batman was not the centerpiece of the war as it was presented to everybody else. Riddler trying to make Joker laugh to solve this riddle was the whole point. And Batman gets so pissed off about all this that such a stupid petty thing was the cause and effect of everything that he just wants to kill the Joker. Kill the Riddler. I apologize once again. And this doesn't work because, like I said, Batman is a stoic, angry action figure from the very first time he shows up in this story. This is not the story of the young punk rock Batman from 0 Year getting put in a really terrible situation, trying and failing to resolve it, then doing all this stuff like teaming up with the Riddler, who he knows has murdered children and all this other terrible stuff, and then realizing that you started this whole war over a fucking riddle. It's not that story. It would be a really compelling story if it was, seeing this young punk rock Batman realizing that all of this horrible stuff was for this reason, and then gradually becoming more jaded, more angry, and more cynical as the year goes by. That's a story. That's an arc. And that would make Batman's decision to just snap, to just say, I'm going to kill you, and then actually trying no holds barred to kill the Riddler, and then Joker stopping him. That would be such a much more powerful moment if Batman was an actual character. But like I said, this is not a Batman who has anything approaching a personality. This is a stoic, secretly angry action figure who's constantly scowling and grimacing at everything, no matter what. And instead of being a scowling action figure who beats people up to near death, he's a scowling action figure who actually tries to kill somebody. Whoa, such a fucking shift. Holy crap, I can't believe it. It doesn't work. It falls so completely flat. Like, this should be like a super big deal, but the execution just makes everything feel forced or dumb or just fall completely flat. And people have told me, oh, well, Riddler says this is not a story about Batman. That's one of the reasons that makes Batman try to kill him at the end, because this is not a war to solve the greatest joke or the greatest riddle that is the Batman. That's not the story. Batman's just an afterthought, and when Batman realizes this, the fact that such a stupid, petty reason was the cause of all this death and misery, that's supposed to make him snap. And this would mean so much more to Batman personally if Batman was also a person who tried to resolve the conflict, who tries and fails over and over and over again. And we could see that. We could see him trying and failing and sympathize with him. And then when he realizes how much of this misery and death and his own personal misery was just all for just this stupid, petty reason, you could definitely empathize with Batman. But like I said, Batman is characterized as a stupid, scowling, angry action figure from beginning to end. So when he decides to kill someone in his scowling, angry action figure fashion, it falls completely flat. And it's really insane how stupendously Tom King fails to give you any kind of depth to Batman's character, because all of this is narrated by Bruce fucking Wayne with several years of experience in retrospect. It makes absolutely no sense how you could write a story that's narrated by your protagonist and then you completely fail to give us any actual insight into what the protagonist was actually feeling and thinking. He has literally no personality except getting angrier still and scowling slightly harder. And this is not helped by Michael Jannon's art, because Michael Jannon, sometimes he works, sometimes he doesn't. But he is not an artist who has very good range with faces and that kind of stuff. Like, his Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson look very, very similar to one another. They have very similar facial builds, very similar body structures. He's not a particularly skilled artist and that kind of thing. And if you're going to try and go for this approach where Batman is always kind of composed, you need to have a really good artist who's going to give us insight into Batman's feelings and emotions if you're not going to really delve into it through the writing. And Michael Jannon is not the artist to do that. Like I said, his Batman has the same fucking facial expression no matter what is happening in the entire freaking storyline. Literally, it is impossible to discern anything going on in Batman just from the art. But Tom King is trying to kind of go for something where he's like trying to add nuances to Batman instead of spelling it out through narration or like actual dialogue or anything. He's trying to, I guess, convey it through the art, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because Michael Jannon is simply not a good enough artist to do something like that. And there are a lot of moments in the art that fall flat like that, where Batman is just in carnage or he's standing next to a pile of dead bodies. And these moments should be really, really powerful, but like I say, they fall so flat because Batman has the personality of a brick fucking wall, and you feel nothing for him, you feel nothing for the casualties. It's all just a bunch of really boring people doing really, really boring things for the majority of the time. And the only time the storyline actually gets any energy is with Kite Man and kind of some of the action sequences. And that is a part where Michael Jannon does actually excel at stuff. When he has to do a fight scene, Jannon does it really, really good. And there are some actually like big moments where the art is just led to speak for itself that do land. But these are mostly, like I said, action-oriented, and they don't work outside of that spectrum whatsoever. And then we get to Kite Man. And Kite Man is probably the most tragic character in this entire storyline, and he's probably the only element that works the entire way through. He's a dude who's been kind of considered a joke his entire life. His wife doesn't take him seriously. His son likes him in spite of that. But he's a dude who's not particularly great at anything, and he's always been kind of the butt of everybody's jokes. And then through a series of events, he's made into the Kite Man after Riddler murders his son. And Kite Man is basically engineered from the beginning to be this guy who will undermine the Riddler and kind of help Batman bring him down. And the whole tragedy of the Kite Man is the fact that he is a guy who kind of gets the agency. He's kind of a dude who, in spite of his multitude of failures and defeats, he always gets back up. He always tries to do something else. And the story does a really effective job of convincing you that, holy shit, Kite Man's about to accomplish something. He's about to help end the war of jokes and riddles. And then Riddler drops the bomb where Kite Man was basically always supposed to exist, that he was pre-planned. And that already makes him, once again, a joke, because he thought he was going to be one of the big saviors of the arc. He was going to be the guy who's going to help Batman save the day. And in the end, he was just, once again, nothing but a tool for the guy who murdered his son. And that's really fucked up and sad, and I really sympathize with the guy. He is the element of the story where not only Tom King actually has a somewhat compelling protagonist, but he does a really good job of making you feel for the guy and also showing you the perpetual misery that is his existence. It really is a sad character. And reading his stuff makes me wish and wonder where the fuck is the other character writing for a person like Batman, for example? Why the fuck does Kite Man have significantly better characterization or any characterization versus the dude who is narrating this in a conversation that is supposed to be really emotionally taxing for him? For fuck's sake, Tom King. And then there are other story decisions that I just can't reconcile. Like, Joker is already supposed to be so tired of Batman that he can't laugh at anything. And I guess this whole ending where Joker is the only guy who stopped Batman from outright killing someone is supposed to deepen their relationship. But like I said, this is super early in Batman's career. Like, there's no reason for Joker to already be this tired and broken and jaded about it. Just like there's no good reason for Batman to be so jaded and stoic and angry about it. Once again, it's a story decision that would make a lot more sense if you said it way later in the timeline, but because this is supposed to be after, or rather this is supposed to be before Batman proposes to Catwoman, but also before all the other New 52 comics we've seen, and before Robin and Batgirl, the story can't happen anywhere but Batman's early career, but it's not really written with that in mind. In fact, the entire Rogues Gallery, apparently, of Batman shows up in the span of like 5 months, and they're all ready to go and ready to fight. So, yeah, that's another story decision that doesn't work. And going back to the Riddler, once again, the Riddler has actually some cool riddles that he does bring up. I do appreciate that. But he falls into that generic bad guy, evil master plan trope of, I planned everything out. Aren't I smart? I am the writer known as Tom King. And writers love to do this kind of crap, and it never works. Because there are so many instances where the people necessary to complete this plan can and probably should die. There's like 1,000,001 chance that they don't. Like, for example, Deadshot and Deathstroke, they fight one another for 5 fucking days straight in Gotham City, and Batman barely apparently beats them. Batman could have died there. And if Batman's dead, the whole war is over. You can't solve the riddle of the man who laughs at everything but can't laugh at anything now if Batman's dead. What if the Riddler was killed by someone? What if Kite Man was killed by someone? Or what if the Joker was killed by someone? Like, it's a classic example of the writer trying to look cool and smart to the audience by making a big, I planned everything reveal, but it never fucking works out. And because like I said, there are so many instances where things could have absolutely gone to shit, where things could have completely gone off the rails, that nobody can 100% predict for them, that when I'm reading the comic, I just think to myself, you're not smart. You're just a forced story device to make the ending look cooler and better than it already is. And like I said, the ending falls flat for another reason, because we've seen Batman try to kill everybody at various different points. It's not special. It's not unique. It just falls flat because it's supposed to be a big, profound moment in Batman's new continuity history. But like I said, when you've seen Batman do this kind of shtick, and the story fails to make you care about his struggle, you just kind of shot the integrity of the entire war of the jokes and riddles in the face with a shotgun blast. All these things falling apart simultaneously leads to a big moment that just doesn't work whatsoever. There are just so many narrative decisions here that I don't understand what the hell Tom King was thinking. And I don't get it, because he's writing Mr. Miracle at the same time as his Batman run, and Mr. Miracle is great. It's fantastic. He's using all the standard tropes that you can find in his Batman work, and he's done it in Omega Man, he's done it in Vision, he's doing it in Mr. Miracle, and he executes it all so well there. But the second you make him write a character he's very clearly a super fan of, the super fan wins out, and Tom King, the good storyteller, takes a back seat to the drooling 12-year-old version of himself who's like, oh man, look how fucking cool this is, I'm writing Batman. So yeah, the word jokes and riddles. There are a lot of narrative decisions here that just absolutely make no sense to me. It's not egregiously awful like I Am Gotham or I Am Suicide, But for fuck's sake, an arc called The War of Jokes and Riddles about Batman's early history, about this big profound moment in Batman's backstory, all this stuff should work so much better than it already does. And I hope to Christ that some writer pretty much takes the premise of this someday and just executes it better, because as you can tell, I'm not a fan of this. And I overall, if you're someone who has very little experience with reading Batman's comic book history, you're probably going to love this. Or if you have no history at all, you're going to love this too, because I think that it is fairly accessible if you're just someone who knows the general gist of the Riddler, Batman, and the Joker, and kind of the whole situation in Gotham. A couple things might confuse you, but overall, I think this is a story that for new readers is probably going to be a really good time. But for someone like me who has seen actual capable writers who happen to be fans of Batman focus on the good story first and the Batwanking at a very distant third or second, read this, where the Batwanking is first, second, third, fourth, and fifth place, and the good writing is somewhere at the 9th or 10th rank, it's really just a frustrating experience. It's the Dragon Ball Super of Batman comics. It's a train wreck that annoys me perpetually, but it's so fascinating in its brokenness that I can't help but keep watching to see how else can they fuck it up. And also, kudos to DC for introducing the bold new direction of Batman being engaged by having the next story arc be a big dick-sucking factory to the dual Neil era of the Batman storylines of old, with him globe-trotting, taking off his shirt, fighting on a sword. Really, dick-sucking the past is a great way to promote the future of Batman, which is supposed to be a bold new direction for the character. Really great stuff, Tom King and DC. You guys are really a true brain trust that can do no wrong.